Mr. Wittman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Warmoth, General McConville, thank you so much for joining us today. General McConville, I want to begin with you. Last March, you said that you had concerns about cutting end strength and what that was doing to stress on the force. I think at that time, the Army end strength was 485,000. Today, as we speak, I think it's around 476,000. The budget request takes it down to 473,000. First of all, do you still think that end strength is an issue? And do you think the current end strength allows us what we need with our Army to combat the threats we see both in Europe, in the Indo-PACOM? And if there were additional resources, would you suggest an increase in end strength?
Well, Congress, first of all, I am concerned about end strength. I stand by my concerns. But I believe quality is more important than quantity. And, we're coming out of a tough place with COVID, and, recruiters are getting back into high schools. There's a lot of things going on. A lot of businesses are having a hard time hiring. So there's a lot of things going on in the country right now. And so, if you could ask my advice, we take a pause, we keep the quality up. We talk a lot about, the call to service. As the Secretary said, 83% of the young men and women that come in the Army are military family members. And so it's really become a military family business, and I believe that the Army and a lot of other services should be an American family business. And so we've got to get more access. We've got to show people the value of serving their country. And I think we need to do this over the next couple of years. And so as the threat changes, we can take a look at, bringing quality people in. And again, I'm not doing a commercial, but I think there's a lot of value for working class kids like me that came in the Army. I signed all my kids up, and I'd like to see everyone else do the same.
There you go. General McConville, thank you. Secretary Warmoth, listen, I believe we have the best Army on the face of the earth, period. No question. The challenge is going to be, if conflict breaks out, how do we get those soldiers to the fight? Listen, our soldiers are great, but you know what? They can't walk on water. I wish they could, and they probably could find a way to do that. But short of that, we need to get them to the fight. 95% of the ability to get our soldiers and the equipment to the fight is done by sea lift. Today, as we speak, the Ready Reserve Force, which is your Ready Reserve Fleet, which is what we will use to take soldiers to the fight, only about 40% of those ships would actually be available to sail today. So we can do all the great things about recruiting and retaining and training and having the best Army on the face of the earth, which we do. But if they can't get to the fight, then the question is, what are we doing? Do you believe that more needs to be done to build surge sea lift capacity so that we have that? And what more can the Army do to advocate for that, to make sure that that happens? Because right now as we speak, the Navy's not doing it because the Navy can get to the fight. They don't have a whole lot of concern about surge sea lift. But I would argue it's one of the most important logistical parts of our military that's in atrophy today.
Congressman, you're absolutely right that military sea lift is critical for us in getting our forces and our equipment, over to Europe or into Indo-PACOM, for example. So we do have an active conversation with the Navy about what they are doing with their sea lift capability and capacity. Ultimately, it's the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary of Defense who make those decisions, but through our program budget review process, we have a dialogue with the Navy, and we certainly hold up our hand and say, hey, we need to have some support from you all to get our folks over to where they need to be.
Secretary Warmoth, would you be willing to do more than just hold up your hand? Would you be willing to pound on the desk a little bit to make sure that surge sea lift is part of this? Because I am so afraid that with all these efforts that we're putting forth, that if we can't get to the fight, it's going to take more than just raising your hand. Sometimes you have to shake things up a little bit. Sometimes you have to say, Mr. Secretary, this is a critical need, a critical gap for the Army, and that has to happen. We've hollered about it on this committee for years, and the Navy kind of slow plays it. We've given them authorizations to purchase multiple ships. They just started down the road of purchasing 2 ships. We're not where we need to be, so I just want to get your perspective, if you're willing to hit the table.
Well, I certainly always try to be a very strong advocate for the Army and for our requirements, and I'll continue to do that.
Very good. Thank you, Secretary Warmoth. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Gallego.